Hello everyone, my name is Amber. Welcome back to my channel, Amber Reads Romance. Today I'm going to be going over my end of the month wrap up for February. It was kind of a tough month for me, but I ended up doing pretty good. So I'm not too hard on myself with the amount that I read, because if you've seen my previous videos, you know life has been a little hard for me lately. So I'm going to dive into just quickly some of my stats, briefly the stats, and then we're going to go into the books that I read for the last half of February. Okay, so for the month of February, I actually read 26 books. Not where I wanted to go, but I did actually get a lot of my TBR done. Some books that I wasn't able to get to that I'm putting off and I'm going to read in March. Hopefully, I'm going to try and stick to it to finally get some of these books that have been on my TBR forever off. But I read 26 books and it kind of felt like a really difficult month. I'm pretty easy at giving 5 stars, and I didn't give as many 5 stars as I usually do. But the last half of February actually gave me 2 6 stars. So I'm going to be talking about those in this video. So it definitely ended on a high note with my books. So I read 26 books, 2 6 stars, like I said. I had 7 5 stars, 2 4.5 stars, 11 4 stars, and then 3 3.5 stars. And then I had 1 2.5 star, which ended up being our buddy read, which was hilarious. I have my feelings of that book in the previous mid-month wrap up for February. If you're interested, I will link down that video down below. I'll try to remember to put up in the cards. And also, we did have a pretty funny live show on Bestie Book Reviews' channel regarding that 2.5 star, because we were all different. But anyways, so those are like my stats of what I read for the month. This last 2 weeks of February, I did read 14 books. So I'm going to go over 14 books in this wrap up. So let's just go ahead and dive right in, because I don't want to talk too long, and I do intend to do that. Just an FYI, I am going to try doing weekly wrap ups in March. Since I'm just starting it, I am going to start with the first, since I did do the end of the month wrap up and everything. And that's kind of, I think it was like Thursday midweek. So I'm going to have a longer, kind of like a week and a half wrap up for my first one. But I'm going to try weekly wrap ups, because these videos end up being long with mid-month wrap ups, and I want to try and do a shorter video, and that way I can talk about the book as much as I want to. Just an FYI. So let's go ahead and dive into these books. Okay, sorry about that. I had something in my eye. So for the first book I read was When Hearts Ignite by Victoria Loom. This was an arc. I just read one of her arcs previously. It was the first time I read her, and I really loved it, so I wanted to request this arc. It is the start of a new series, but it's kind of like tied to that previous series she wrote. This is When Hearts Ignite, and it is the first book in the Orchid City series. This is between Stephen Kingsley and Grace. And this is a billionaire workplace kind of romance. Basically, Grace is going to be his intern. She's one of the many group of interns at his company. He's very ruthless, smart businessman. And she is out to prove herself. One thing I loved about her character is she is works her ass off. She comes in hours before the rest of the interns. So they end up having a lot of interactions as he's coming in early. And she actually stood out the first meeting where she caught stuff that some of his employees weren't even catching. And so he was very impressed by her. And so they kind of built this kind of great relationship, and they're kind of like friends where they pretend like it's not workplace, since it's before work hours, that they hang out and they talk about things. And so they kind of are pining for each other. But what I loved about this is he doesn't pursue anything because she works for him. So there's none of that bad, unequal dynamic kind of thing, or him having power over her. And I really liked that. So she really needs this job. They're going to offer, I think, a couple jobs at the end of the internship, and she really needs it to help pay for her mother's debts and her sister's like expensive ballet school. So a lot is riding on this. And when she finds out she's not going to get that job, she kind of disappears. And things were just starting to get like good between them, and he was hoping they could pursue things, differently. But she kind of like disappears. And what ends up happening is she ends up working as a dancer at the Orchid, which is kind of in this other series too. It's a very high-end club where, they have exclusive, beautiful like rooms and dancing and dancers and strippers, but also like places where you can hook up. So it's like the high profile celebrities, businessmen can come to this place. She ends up being a stripper like there, like a high-end one. And so he runs into her like months later, and he's just kind of like shocked because she had so much potential and she's so smart. And so once he sees her again, he's like, no, like I need her. And so he starts to pursue her. So I really loved this. I thought it was really cute. I did think there was like a twist that was supposed to be this big twist that I saw coming, and I even saw the solution coming. So it didn't really it was okay. It didn't ruin the book or anything. So I really liked this romance. I think Stephen Kingsley was like really swoon worthy. He was like all in on her and would woo her and treat her like a queen. So I love that. So I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars and 3 chilies. Okay, so the next arc that I read was Devious Vow by Jagger Cole. I don't know how I feel about this new series by Jagger Cole. This is the second book in the Venomous God series. I read the previous arc of it. I did give the first book, I think I ended up giving 5 stars because it was an arc, and mostly because it had like a really good BDSM as healing scenes that like really, I loved those, and it was like a unique story. This one, I was kind of let down a little bit. This is between Alistair and Eloise, and this is, he's one of the lawyers. So these are like the lawyers that, if you read the previous, I think it's the Dark Hearts. I don't know if that's what it's called, Dark Hearts series. I think that's what it's called, but that's the one that I first read by Jagger Cole, and I loved that series. And these are like the lawyers for like a lot of these mafia people and all that kind of stuff. And Alistair's like the adopted brother, and he's pretty ruthless. He's, smart, all these things. But he hates Eloise because they actually went to this academy that a lot of like mafia or high up people went to. It was called, the Knight's Blood Academy, or no, University. So that's where they went to college and everything. And him and Eloise kind of had this kind of weird, almost enemies to lovers relationship where they would banter and kind of go after each other, but like she was into him. So they have this kind of history at this university, and something happens, which is like a miscommunication, misunderstanding, and now he hates her. And it's like 10 years later, and she has actually been forced into marrying a mafioso. She was like a mafia princess. And this is Massimo. And he was actually brought up in the Dark Heart series too, because he was supposed to marry one of the heroines in that, and they managed to get her out of it. Well, this guy is a complete psycho. He does a lot of sick things in this book. Like, he's not even sexual with his wife. So him and Eloise have never had sex. He literally like will make chicks give him blowjobs and make her watch and like make her look at him. And he's like very threatening and rough with the girls. And so he's just a psycho. And so they haven't even had a sexual relationship. It's basically like a horrible marriage. And he's forcing Alistair and his brother to hire her because she actually did get her degree to become a lawyer. But he doesn't let her be a lawyer really. And so he wants her to work there because he needs documents that Alistair has, and he needs a little spy there. So she starts to work there, and she's like basically working under Alistair, and they supposedly hate each other. And so it's this very enemies to lovers, bully type of situation going on here. And it was okay. My thing is that if you read the Dark Heart series, there is literally so much of this that was in one of those books. Because a hero in that, his name was Deimos, and I loved this book, but him and this girl hated each other, and it was because of stuff that went down at this academy, this university, the same one. And so they he held a grudge against her, but he was wrong, and it was a big misunderstanding, miscommunication, and then years later they come together in like this enemies to lover situation. So it literally felt like a recycled story. I mean, obviously there were things that were different, but it felt very similar to that. And so I wasn't all in on this story. So, I mean, again, I couldn't put it down. I read it probably like in a day because Jagger writing's very easy to read. He sucks you in. But I don't know how I'm feeling about this series compared to the previous one. I am still going to request the arc for the third one to see how it goes and see if maybe it gets a little better. But I ended up giving this one 4 stars because it was an arc. It might be more like a 3.5, but I gave it 4 stars. And then it was 3 chilies. They do get after it sexually, like in all of Jagger Cole's romances. So I don't know. We'll see what I think with the next one. Hopefully it'll be a little bit better, but I'm not sure. Okay, so then I read another arc. You can see I had to read a lot of arcs. I read Devoted by Leigh Skarin. I think that's how you say her last name. I've never read this author before. I think she contacted me on Instagram. And so I was happy to get an arc. This is more of like a romantic suspense. So this is actually between Deacon and Shy. And this is a childhood friends to lovers where they, like, something happened where they couldn't be together. And then it's like 5 years later. So Deacon had been like in love and pining after Shy since he was like a kid. They were really close friends. And then obviously in teenage years, he started to like really fall for her. And then right when they start to like date, his brother was in the military and he gets killed in action. But his brother had a girlfriend at home and she was pregnant. So he basically felt like he needed to step up. And he was about to like almost get, you know, he was like a pretty big hopeful to be in the NHL, to get, you know, or at least go to college with hockey playing. And he basically gives that all up to kind of be a father figure to his nephew, you know. So he's basically kind of almost single dad vibes in this because he steps up as a father figure for him. And they basically feel like their relationship can't really work because he's going to put all his you know, time and energy in that. And so they kind of end up breaking up. She actually breaks up with him because she just feels like it's not going to be good for them. And she doesn't want to be a burden and all those kind of dumb reasons. But you're like, okay. So he kind of ends up pushing her away and like not really being friends with her because he can't just be friends with her. So he's kind of pushed her away for like the last 5 years. And now Shy's dad has Alzheimer's and it's pretty aggressive. And so he really always wanted to see her get married. So she wants to get married so her dad could have that. And so she was going to ask her boyfriend, but she ends up finding like he's like a cheater and all this kind of stuff. And so Deacon actually finds out and he's like, well, let's get married. And so they have a marriage of convenience in this. But for Deacon, it's real. And he keeps trying to explain that to her, but she has like such a low self-esteem about it and like always doubts it. So that got kind of annoying. She is the character that's the overthinker. She overthinks things and stresses out and is like jumping ahead, you know, and thinking about everything that could go wrong. And so that was kind of frustrating, but it wasn't horrible. You could understand her reasonings. But after they get married, they're actually getting like these threatening notes. Her car gets bombed or exploded or whatever. So she has this crazy stalker kind of after her. And so this is more where like the romantic suspense is in. And so they kind of have to kind of go away to try and be away from the stalker. And they're slowly like kind of rebuilding their relationship and they have great chemistry. And so I really liked this. I had no idea, you know, usually in these stalker or suspenseful books, like you can pretty much guess who it is every time. I had no idea where this book was going. So I appreciated that because usually I guess. I did love it because the spice was pretty spicy for what I was expecting. He like wants to fulfill all her fantasies. And so some of the kinks that are in this book are public sex. They do role playing, which was like really hot. and a lot of primal play. So I wasn't expecting primal play in like a romantic suspense, but they brought it, and I love primal play, so there you go. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars and 3.5 chilies for all that like role play, primal play, all that good stuff. So I definitely enjoyed it. Okay, then I read Disclaim by Pam Godwin. This is book number 3 in the Deliver series. I don't know what to say here because if you haven't read the first 2 books, I'm going to give a lot away. So I'm kind of iffy on how much I should say. This is a very dark romance series. It is set with sex trafficking, so just be aware. As always with Pam Godwin, she is the best at writing dark romance, but you should do your research, double check those triggers just before you go into this. So if you haven't read the first 2, you might want to skip till the next book comes up because I might be giving some things away. I'm going to try not to give too much away, but it is kind of spoilery once we get to the 3rd book. So this is between Mateus and Camilla. And Camilla was actually Liv from the first book. Liv and her partner, Van, they would actually find, they would kidnap, and take people to be sex slaves, and they would train them to be the sex slaves. So there's a big twist in that book of what's going on with that. But Camilla was the first slave, and she is actually fighting to stop sex traffickers, and they're all kind of doing that. So Camilla has been on this journey of trying to fight these sex traffickers, and she actually is going to go undercover to try and get these certain group of sex traffickers that she's after, and it ends up having ties to her childhood love. So she was actually in love with Mateus, and she got kidnapped, and he was like taken away. A lot goes on. So they haven't been in touch for a while. I think she was kind of getting help from him with going after sex traffickers just for like other info, but she had no idea who he's really tied to now. And so when she goes undercover and she shows up, she's actually sees Mateus there, and you're just like, oh fuck. So he actually, has a lot of stuff going on. He's got his own reasons. He's got his own motives and what he's up to. But I don't know. Pam Godwin always takes you on a journey. There was a lot of DubCon, and he really, she's a very strong, badass, strong heroine. But she likes to be submissive with him. And so he's kind of playing up that slave submissive dynamic. So it's very interesting. It's hard to even talk about because you don't want to give anything away, but I really enjoyed this. I actually listened to the audiobook, and it was really well done. Again, trigger warnings are sex trafficking, DubCon, assault, all the stuff that goes into that. So I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I didn't love it as much as the previous 2. The previous one was Van's romance, and Van was like the villain in the first one. So like Van's arc and like redemption and all of that is just so much stronger than what this book felt like to me. So it was kind of like a hard one to follow, but it was still a really great book. So I'd recommend this series if you can handle dark romance. Okay, so then I listened to Worth the Fall by Claudia Connor. This is a big rec that Jen from the Book Refuge has. I think it was like her best. It was one of her 6 stars and best of the top 10 of the year. And so I was dying to get a hold of it. I don't think you can actually buy the physical copies anymore. They don't make them. But you can get the ebook. And it was on AnyPlay. So I was really excited that it was on AnyPlay. So I went ahead and listened to this audiobook, and it was amazing. So this is between Matt and Abby. And Matt is actually a Navy SEAL. He's kind of on a forced leave right now. And he's like on vacation. And he kind of runs into Abby and her kids. Abby is a recent widow. Her husband died like about 6 months ago. He was a pretty neglectful husband and father. He was very career driven. And so they weren't like the best. But she also has 4 kids, and she's pregnant. So he kind of runs into them and he keeps like just being drawn to them and hanging out with her and her kids and just building this relationship with them. And so they end up having just this great connection. But they're only there for a week. So they end up kind of getting in touch after the vacation too. And he would like fly out to see her. And they slowly start to build this romance. And it was just so beautiful because Abby went through a lot where she was in her mother died and a really bad thing. So trigger warnings too for that. But she was put in the system and she was basically like continuously like abandoned. So she's got major abandonment issues, but she's also falling for a Navy SEAL who's very dedicated to his job. He never wants to quit. He feels like his best friend that was in the Navy SEALs died, and he kind of like made a promise to him to like keep it going, stay with the SEALs. And so he feels like he has to stay with the Navy SEALs because he promised his friend. And so that's really kind of a tough thing for somebody who has abandonment issues, and then your man's going off for who knows how long on secret missions. And so it's just tough for her. But he is so sworn worthy, and he steps it up and he communicates with her and he flies out to her. And it's just so sweet. Like, Matt is like top book boyfriend. He was having me swooning this whole book. I loved how he had a relationship with like each of her kids. Like, she has like a shy daughter that was like hard to get through her, like, and then when he kind of like had to disappear on a mission, she was all like sad, and he was just so sweet with her. So I just really, really love this book. I ended up giving it 6 stars. I got kind of emotional listening to it. I didn't have full tears, but I definitely had the teary eyes. I was just really touched. I love the pregnant but not with his baby trope. I don't know what it is, but I love a man that takes care of the woman and the baby and the family, and it's not even his family, you know? It's just beautiful. So I gave this one 6 stars. It's 2 chilies. You don't really need the spice. It's more emotional and beautiful. So I definitely recommend this. There's a trigger warning of a loss of a parent to suicide, so just be aware of that. Then I read The Alien's Prize by Zoey Draven. This is a like kind of like an alien book club that Tip Talks Pages is doing, and I just wanted to read this. It was actually a novella too, and I didn't realize it was like a novella series like based on the same couple. So I'm probably going to end up continuing it because I had a good time. This is the first book in the Warriors of Luxuria series. And this is between, I don't even know if I'm going to say his name right, you guys. Foxon? I don't know. We'll just call him Foxon. And Kate. And Kate it's the typical thing where they get kidnapped from Earth and they're being like sold. You know, we've seen that in so many books, but it never gets old for me. And she ends up being like all naked with these other women taken out to like almost like this Coliseum type of a stadium type of thing. And aliens are basically like fighting it out to the death, and then they get to take one of the women. Voxon is actually there because he needs to get a breeder for his people. He is the, what is he? Oh, the prime leader of Luxuria. And so a lot of their women died from like this plague that was given to them by like during a war. And so they need help continuing their line and having babies. So he's there for a breeder. But the second he sees Kate, he realized that's my mate. So this is a fated mate's alien romance. And so he wins and he takes her. And she just wants to go home, which always is annoying to me in like the alien romance where it's like nonstop. I just want to go back to Earth. Whatever. It happens in everyone, and so he basically says, "Oh, we don't have the ability to get you back to your planet. It requires a specific like whatever power source." He can't get her back to her planet, but she makes him give her like a 30-day or 20, I can't remember how many days, like a month. And then he needs to get her home. And really, he has no plans. He's thinking, she's my fated mate. Once we do our mating and all of that, it'll be fine. So he's pretty alpha. He pretty goes for it. But I actually really enjoyed it. It wasn't amazing by any means. Zoey Draven's Horde King series, I still need to finish, is amazing, but this is some of her earlier work, so I did still really enjoy it. I ended up giving this 4 stars and 3.5 chilies, and it was good fun. Okay, this is going to be kind of different. It's not really a typical romance that I read. My mom recommended this series to me, and I thought it was going to be like romantic suspense or romance. It has no romance in this first book. It is a series. I think it gets to the romance maybe in like the 4th book, so I wasn't really fully aware of that. So this is more of like a suspense post-apocalyptic book. But what I'm talking about is Edge of Collapse. This is by Kyla Stone. I actually listened to this. I think the whole series is on Anyplay, so it was a good audiobook. I enjoyed that. This is between Hannah and Liam, because Hannah has actually been kidnapped. She's stuck in this room for like the last 5 years being like tortured and assaulted by her kidnapper. He's a true psychopath. And an EMP blast goes on in the world. And so that actually makes it so she can leave her room because it has a lot of security and locks and stuff. So she's finally able to leave that room and escape. But she's in like this cabin in the middle of nowhere where it's winter, it's snowy, it's like in the woods. And she ends up having to like try and run for her life because she doesn't know when that her kidnapper will return. There's a dog outside that was like kind of a dog that he had that he didn't treat very well. So she helps free him and he goes off on the run. But he ends up catching up to her later and he's like her dog. So she is end up like going through snow, like freezing, barely getting through anything. And she actually runs into Liam. And he is like, he was a soldier and he's a very cut off, grumpy, you know, he has a lot of trauma and a lot of baggage. And he runs into her and she doesn't trust anyone. She's been like kidnapped by this guy for years, so she just wants him to go away. He runs into like an isolated cabin and he's like keeps thinking about her and feeling guilty because she was obviously pregnant. And so he goes back to get her because she was almost like going out with like hypothermia and like passing out, and like the dog was laying up against her. And so he takes her back to the cabin. And so they're going to start this journey to try and get to where she was actually married and had a son when she was kidnapped. So she needs to get back to that. She wants to find her husband and child. And so they're going to go on this journey together. The problem is that this psychopath is on the hunt for them. He is a really skilled hunter and killer, and he's manipulative. And so he's chasing them down and kind of hunting them down. So that's what this book is. It ends super abruptly, so I didn't really like that. I get that it's like a cliffhanger and then like a continuous series, but it just was like an abrupt end. I didn't realize it was going to end like that. But it did have a lot of suspense, a lot of, you know, survivalist kind of stuff going on. So if you like that, I would definitely recommend it. It was well done. It was really well written. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. There is absolutely no spice in this, you guys. It's them running for their lives. So it's no spice. Right after that, I ended up reading the novella. So this is like 0.5 for Edge of Collapse. It's kind of like a prequel. And this dives into Liam's story, and you find out why he has so like traumatized and like shut off and everything, because it's going to show what happened where he was like in the city with his brother and his brother's wife who happened to be pregnant. And when the EMP blast went on, it was like chaos in the city, and like literally like 2 planes come down. And so his brother dies, and his brother's wife was like pregnant and she was like gonna bleed out, and so she wants him to help get her baby out before she dies. It's really dark, you guys. This is like the most depressing novella. I usually read novellas that are like sweet and sexy or super spicy. This was like just depressing. But I thought it was a really well told novella that gave me insight to Liam's character. So I did enjoy it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Okay, so anyways, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And again, there's no spice. Liam was actually kind of in love with his brother's wife. So that was like a really sad thing too. And what went on with the baby. He does, trigger warnings, he does have to kind of do a C-section and get the baby out after she passes. So just be aware that's pretty traumatizing scene. So big trigger warning for that. Okay, so the next book that I read was actually for my 12 recs from 12 friends. I'm trying to read a book a month from my 12 recs. I did post this on my Instagram. If you're interested, I do have that available there. But I read Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geissinger. This was the first book in the Beautifully Cruel series. I don't know if it's just a duet. I don't know if there's only 2 books in it. I'm not positive. But this one is between Liam Black and True. And this is kind of like mafia, well, it's mafia, slight captor-captive romance. You have Liam Black, and he has been coming to True's diner where she's a waitress for like the last year. He always sits in her section, only wants to go to her, but he doesn't really talk. And he just kind of like stares at her and is this broody, sexy guy. And so she's always really intrigued by him. He has been basically trying to keep away from her. He's been obsessed with her for like the last year. He saw her and actually followed her to her work. And then he kept coming to her work just to see her. But he is the head of the Irish mafia. So he feels like he can't be in a relationship and her life would be in danger being with him. So he basically has just been going there to get his fix. One night she's attacked while taking out the trash at the diner by these guys, and he helps save her. And from that point on, he's done. He wants to try and be with her. He can't get over her. He can't stop thinking about her, and it's taking over his like business time when he needs to be on point. And so he basically propositions to her to like, hey, let's have like a 28-day fling. I want you to move into my place and be with me full time, so I can get this out of my system. And she's very attracted to him. She wants to hook up with him or have something with him, but she's like, I love how she was smart enough to be like, no, like that doesn't seem realistic. Like, well, I'll fall for you. Like, I'm not just going to be able to cut it off after like a certain amount of days. And so he decides to take things into his own hands and kind of just takes her to his place. So this is kind of like a soft captive, soft kidnapping because she doesn't really try that hard to get away. At one point, he even takes her out to a dinner and like tests her like to see if she trusts him, like so that she could like when she goes to the bathroom, there's a door to escape, and she doesn't. She stays. So they end up kind of having this fling for their month. I obviously like, okay, I really enjoyed this. I loved Liam Black. He was super alpha and sexy, and I loved that. I did think the heroine was really naive because everyone was talking about how powerful he is. He had like police in his pockets. He's doing all this. He's super rich, but she like was like, what is he? Like, didn't know that he was in the mafia. And I was just like, come on, sweetie. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I did dock a star because I did think the ending, the big reveal about who he really is, was really over the top and like unnecessary. And I did remember this coming up because he actually has a twin, and that twin is like this character that I think is like a pretty big character for J.T. Geissinger. And I remember reading one of her current series, and it brought him up, and he's like the spy and all this stuff. And he's like this badass, you know, and I'm like, who is this guy? Well, that's this guy's brother. And so the big reveal of who they really are, I was just like, really? Like, we need to do like that? So I don't know, that kind of, it was just really unbelievable and over the top to me. I didn't really think it needed it. I just wanted it to be a regular mafia thing. But I did really enjoy it. I thought it was spicy. It had the funny banter that you get with J.T. Geissinger. I just didn't think it really needed that at the end there. But so I ended up giving it 4 stars and 3.5 chilies. Next, I read Caught Up by Liz Tomforde. This is one that's been on my TBR forever, and I just kept putting it off. I really loved The Right Move. It was a 6-star read for me. Ryan Shea is top book boyfriend material. So it is hard to follow that up. And I was pretty disappointed with Caught Up. I think I had such high expectations and they just fell flat for me. This is a baseball romance. This is between Kai and Miller. And Kai is a single dad. He is a pitcher for a pro baseball team. And he basically is having troubles getting nannies and all of that. He always thinks they're like not that great, and he's kind of firing them. And he's almost to the point of like quitting his like career to be at home dad because he's so focused. He really wants to be a good father. Miller is actually the daughter of his coach, and his coach basically kind of offers her up to be his nanny, at least for the summer, because he wants his daughter around. His daughter is like this really successful like baker, and like, I guess it's not just a baker, it's like a high-end whatever. And she actually goes to all these different restaurants. You know, she's won awards. But she lives out of her van and like just basically goes and helps other people's restaurants to build up their menu with their desserts and everything. So she's very like all over the place. Well, she ended up not going to her other job. And so her dad wants her to stay in Chicago with them and, you know, travel with the team and be able to nanny the kids. So she ends up doing this. And they have like a lot of banter and all this kind of stuff. I would have liked this more, but the heroine really annoyed me. And when the heroine annoys me, I don't enjoy the book. So Miller is like the commitment phobe chick, and I never like them. Like, I don't like girls that are commitment phobes, and her reason is just dumb to me. Her father was in like played baseball, and he ends up being her adopted father. He was dating her mom, and when her mom died, he basically adopted her and quit his career as a baseball player for her. So she feels like she has to be a perfectionist and the best at what she does because he gave up so much for her. And so she refused to stay in one place, though. Like, wouldn't you want to be closer to your father since he did everything for you and like have a stable life? She's not even enjoying what she's doing anymore because she loves cooking for people and baking for people and having their joy. And she's just really doing this high escalated kind of like high end restaurants and helping other people's menus instead of just opening her own place and doing what she loves, baking. Like, I don't get it. Like, and so that reason she's supposed to go to this job in LA after like the months are up, and she's leaving. And so they end up kind of having this fling, even though he wants to fight it at first because he knows she's leaving. But like, she really bonds with his son and they like fall in love. But guess what? She still leaves. And because she can't handle it. And so just her back and forth and like pushing him away and all that kind of stuff was just really annoying to me. And I thought the third act breakup was stupid because she didn't really need to leave and do that whole thing. So I was just really unimpressed with this. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Is 3 chilies because Liz Tomforde does write good spice. I just didn't care. And I didn't think they had this great connection because she kept pushing him away half the time. I did love Kai. I think he was very swoon-worthy, but him like being the one doing everything and like Miller kind of half-assing the relationship just didn't work for me. Okay, so now on to my second 6-star read, and this one blew me away. I actually requested this from Jen. I'm one of her Patreons, so I get annotated books from her. And so I actually requested this to be annotated because it was one of her favorites of 2023. And I finally read You and Me by Tal Bauer. This is an MM romance, and it was so beautiful. It was so emotional. I cried multiple times reading this book. I am so obsessed with Tal Bauer now. Like, I need to read his backlist. So this is between Luke and Landon. And Luke is going through a lot. His wife had died. And him and his son have a really fractured relationship. His son is in high school. He's a football player. Luke was more of like an artist, that kind of guy. He doesn't know anything about football. And he tried to like kind of bond with his son with that before, but the wife would like kind of make it their thing and push him to the side. So when the wife goes, like him and his son are not even talking at this point. They have no relationship, and he just wants to build a relationship with his son. And so he ends up going to one of his football practices and kind of running into this super dad named Landon. And he is actually like kind of like running, I can't remember what it's called, like the Booster Club or something. I don't think it says right here. But anyways, he ends up like getting him to volunteer. He's like, you should volunteer with us. It's mostly like I'm the only guy and then like all the other moms. But so they basically like do dinners for the football team. They like do all the, you know, setup and all this kind of stuff. So he slowly starts to build this relationship with Landon, and they become such good friends. And, you know, he's slowly throughout this book trying to build his relationship with his son. And that was emotional on its own. Like, it's such a big part of this story. So their journey together is just so beautiful and heartbreaking. And, you know, Landon is out. He is gay. His son is actually best friends with Luke's son. So that's another, like, kind of thing is, like, when he starts to fall for Landon, and he's never felt sexually towards a man before. He's kind of like questioning, like, is it just Landon or am I bi? I don't know. But he like really like falls for him. And Landon has actually been kind of crushing on him the whole time, but he didn't want to like, it was really hard for him because it's like, you know, the guy is straight. So just their beautiful friendship and then them coming together, and the way that Luke is just so like open to the fact that he's falling for Landon, but he's worried about him and Landon coming out together as a couple, and that might fracture his relationship further with his son. So this was just so beautiful. It was so deep. I was just loving this. I love that, you know, I got this highlighted copy from Jen, and I just loved this so much. So this one was a 6-star. Another thing that I loved is that they were so intentional and about building a relationship and a foundation and falling in love before they got sexual. And so it took a long time for them to like fully have sex, but it was so beautiful, you guys. So this one I gave 3 chilies just because I love their sex scenes together, but there's not a ton. And I'm totally fine with that because this is what romance should be. It shouldn't just be for spice's sake. This is a beautiful romance, and I highly recommend it. Just watching him build his relationship with his son, that got me to cry, let alone the beautiful relationship between him and Landon. So highly recommend. Okay, so the next book that I read is The Score by Elle Kennedy. This is book number 3 in the Off-Campus series. I am trying to finally get through this series. I literally had the books and I still hadn't read them. Now they're available on Kindle Unlimited, which is awesome. So I loved this book. I think I've given every book 5 stars. This is another 5-star book for me. This is between Dean and Elle, and Dean is like the man whore of the group. Again, if you don't know, this is Off-Campus series. It is college. It is a hockey series. Dean is one of the hockey players, and he's like the man whore that like is always having sex in public. He won't have sex with virgins. He's just very, you know, upfront with who he is. And Elle is best friends with the heroine from the first book, The Deal. And she is kind of like the relationship girl. She's been in long committed relationships, like one in high school and one throughout the whole college, you know, a few years of college. And she finally broke up with her boyfriend, and she's having a hard time sticking to it. And so she ends up, he says he's going to show up at her apartment and her dorm, and she's freaking out. So her friend says, go stay at Garrett's place, where Garrett and the other hockey players live in this house together, and just stay there so he doesn't find you. So she goes there, but the only person there is Dean. And she basically has this night with him where they're hanging out, watching, you know, TV, and like, then they start drinking and they have a one-night stand. And she's kind of never done that before. And she's only the like commitment relationship girl. So she feels kind of horrified that she did this, but their sexual chemistry is off the chart. Dean is not usually the guy that will go back to a girl again, but he can't get her out of his mind. And so he starts to pursue her for a fling. So she eventually like caves in because Dean, even though he's like the man whore, he's very like suave and like funny, and he's got a lot of charisma, and he's just an honest, good guy. So you don't like hate on him, even though he's like the man whore of the group, because he had reasons and he was always honest with everybody, and he's a very loyal guy. So there's a lot of good characteristics to Dean that make you love him in this book. And so they start this fling, and of course feelings are going to start catching, and they're kind of secretly dating. But there is just a craziness in this where I got emotional and was like crying during like this third act, and it's nothing with them like the breakup or like a third act breakup or anything, but it was emotional, and I didn't expect that in this book, so I loved it. I really loved Dean. He was so good like he was just swoon worthy. This is spicy. They like do toys. They're very like in it together, so I just love their dynamic, and I love this series. Oh, so I did end up giving this 4 chilies because of like the toy play, and you know, there's a lot of sex happening in this. Okay, so then the next one I read was a novella. This is an arc. This is Burnout Baby by V. Riviere. This is set, it's like kind of like a standalone little novella set in the apocalypse world. V. Riviere is like a new author. She sent me Apocalypse, and I also read the second book. And it's like this mafia type of series where it's like these women are creating their own criminal empire. So this is kind of set in that world, but this is a street racing novella. This is between Jade and Aiden, and Jade has gone through a bad trauma where she's responsible for somebody dying from like an accident way back, and she's just trying to be a good person and live a good life. But she is short for cash, and she does street racing, and she has been slowly trying to like get more work with War. And War is kind of got mafia ties. He was introduced in the second book as kind of like the enemy to that hero. And so this is giving you an insight into War's world. And so he hires her for certain jobs, and she's trying to get more jobs from him. Aiden is his one of his mechanics at like the shop, which is kind of like a front, but they do extensive work. And so Aiden kind of becomes her ally and is trying to help her because she ends up having to do kind of like go through these tests and compete with these other guys to be like a full member of this like inner circle of Wars. And so they immediately hit it off and start this sexual relationship. And Aiden was just so like always boosting her confidence, always believing in her, totally pushing her to do the right things. He has some secrets, but I love the way it was handled when the secrets are revealed. And this was just really fun. You could tell V did really good job. Like either she knows a lot about racing and cars, or she did a lot of research, because it was very heavily street racing car influence. I don't know anything about it, but it was really well done. So I gave this one 5 stars and 3 chilies. They have a lot of like outdoor, like out in nature on like a bridge type of sex. So it was fun. And the last book that I read was Revelry by Kandi Steiner. This was between Anderson and Wren. And this is kind of like, this was a really low angst, sweet romance. It's available on Audible Plus, so I listened to it on Audible. And Wren was actually just recently divorced. She went from like her 7-year marriage, and she's like kind of going out to this cabin, like this cute little cabin in a small town for a few months in the summer to kind of get away, reset. She's a fashion designer. She has her own like boutique that's really big that she wants to get motivation for that. And so she's just staying at this cabin. She runs into this broody kind of grumpy hero next door, and that is Anderson. And he has a lot of trauma. He feels irresponsible for his cousin dying. That like meant a lot to him. So he's pretty grumpy and cut off from everybody. He just works and goes home. And he ends up having a run-in with her because she decides to skinny dip in her hot tub. But then when she was getting out, like, the boards broke underneath her and she's like falling and screaming. And so he runs over and she's naked. So that was kind of interesting interaction. They kind of have a not a great start, but he offers to help her fix a lot of stuff on the cabin. And so they start hanging out a lot more and they realize they just have this great connection and they start to really fall for each other. The problem is she's leaving at the end of the 3 months and, you know, she just was divorced. And so those are like the little things that are coming up, but it was really sweet and it felt very low ink. So it was a nice way to end it out. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars and 2.5 chilies. I had a great time. I do need to read Kandi Steiner's high angst romance whiskey, A Love Letter to Whiskey. So that's all my goals this year. So those are the books that I read for February. I think it was a pretty great month considering everything that was going on in my personal life. It's been a really down time, so I'm really happy I got a couple 6 stars out of February. It felt great, and I'm excited for March. So, as always, if you guys could like and subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment down below with your favorite read from February or anything you feel about any of these books. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.